something that I've wanted to do for months, and just kind of figure out how the world works. Try to figure out how, try to make things make sense, um, and do so on a very derived basis. Um, so, just trying to figure out, like, way back when philosophy started and everything, uh, and trying to figure out, okay, who do I, and part of this is just me wanting to listen to stuff at work, like, like, okay, I want to listen to all the Greek philosophers and stuff, and it's just I have all this time at work, um, to listen to stuff, fortunately, um, where, like, I'm able to multitask effectively. I'm getting my job done, but yeah, I'm also very bored. I'm able to work quickly and be productive and stuff, but I've also got spare brain space, and I can use that brain space to listen to books and podcasts and video. I could watch videos if I wanted to, but that's a little bit too much of my focus being drawn away from my work. I can listen to, like, YouTube videos, but I can't. I personally just can't really watch them just because it takes too much of my attention away. So I was just gonna get on Wikipedia and look stuff up and kind of try to figure out, okay, who's the first philosopher that I can listen to. That actually wrote stuff down, because, like, I can read certain philosophers and it'd be easy, like, to listen to their work and stuff. Um, but with other stuff, it's just like, you have to really struggle to turn up their works and their writings to understand what's going on. And there's kind of a crossover where you get into, hello, one viewer, you are now realizing that you have to be subscribed for a month to comment. And that's to keep out bots and stuff, because um, I don't have the somebody to do the moderation for me. But pretty much what I'm doing is getting on Wikipedia, looking at the earliest philosophers that I can find, or kind of the prehistory of philosophers. So, starting with the Greeks, really, there's a crossover into religion when it comes to philosophy, and then it becomes like, okay, I don't really want to study religious philosophy. I want to study more analytical and logical philosophy. There's kind of a theory, behind religious philosophy. Like, okay, what were they trying to communicate? What were they trying to, decompile about the universe around them? But the problem is, like, okay, you decided to get it tangled up in superstition instead of going straight forward and into, just trying to make a science of studying philosophy. Like, what I'm trying to do, get a Wikipedia. If it turns out, like, the first philosophers were, if I can find ones that are, like, Indian or stuff other than like ones from like China or Japan, but even Japan is pretty recent, in terms of its history. Um, Africa, uh, you know, South American and North American, like Native American tribes, like, and their philosophies about stuff. Like, that's great. Um, if you didn't have it written down, then I don't know what to tell you. That gets into a very different kind of study. Uh, I don't know how your philosophies work, and if there's a history book, about that stuff and like about the religion, great. I want to hear about it. Um, but I'm also trying to figure out, okay, um, convey your stuff to me like I'm a child learning about this for the first time. Because as far as I'm concerned, like I'm, you know, a novice learning about this stuff. And I want to figure stuff out from the lowest level possible. Um, because I keep running into this problem where I'll be studying more contemporary philosophers. Like, okay, if you try to study like university philosophy at this point, like I just completely have no idea what they're talking about, because it has just evolved so much beyond a point where you can understand what they're talking about, like at a freshman level. Like if you try to read somebody's doctoral thesis, in philosophy and stuff, it's just like you're trying to read a foreign language. So it's just like, okay, what are my options here? I can't just jump in to modern day philosophy and expect to understand it. I have to start somewhere. So it's like, right, can I just go from the oldest to the newest? Can I retrace how humans evolved in their understanding of philosophy? Like, why can't I just do that? Um, because it's like you open a textbook, and what they start doing is they're like, yeah, so here's how philosophy evolved and stuff, and anyway, we're gonna skip over that last 6,000, 7,000, 10,000 years of human understanding, and here's I don't even know who the modern day philosophers are. Marx, Engels, Stirner. I've read some of Ayn Rand, some of it. I don't know if she really counts as a philosopher or not. I've read books on very beginner level logic, and one of my books on my reading list is the Trivium. And I want to read that eventually, but there's books that are just here's logic for babies, that you can start to understand. But I'm kind of just like, give me something to listen to while I'm at work. I want to be able to understand stuff by, Isaac Newton, the Principia Mathematica. And there's that crossover between math and philosophy. What is it that I'm trying to understand? Like, the problem is when I start to go to modern day authors, like, they don't have audiobooks, and they're not in the public domain, which means that I'd have to have a paper copy of it. And that doesn't do me much good if I'm at work, because I'm just like, I can't I can't read a book and do my work at the same time. My ears are unbusy, but my hands and eyes aren't. You know, I'm occupied. I don't know. That's kind of just the basic thing. Maybe what I need to do is make a spreadsheet of what it is that I've read so far. Maybe. I want to just read all the philosophy. But the problem is too, like, you cannot possibly read everything that all philosophers have written. So it's just like, okay, how do you narrow the scope of what it is that you're trying to read? Because in like Avatar: The Last Airbender, where they go into the library and I think what's her face says, I wish I could, I could stay here forever and read. And the owl goes, well, some have. And like they pan over to a skeleton, and it's just like, you have consumed your entire life with just absorbing knowledge and not necessarily applying it or being in reality. So for me at least, it comes to, alright, how am I going to apply the philosophy to life? It becomes a matter of, alright, what are my justifications for my behavior? Am I looking to confirm my biases, or am I trying to go back as far as I can, understand and critique the actions of the past, comparing cultural norms and trying to find something of a unity between all the philosophies, and going, alright, I get that this culture's philosophy was this, and this culture's philosophy was that. But if we compare the shared values to each of those cultures and kind of figure out, okay, well, this is one culture's argument for why this should be the case, and this is this culture's argument for why that should be the case. Try them as if it's, a court case. Is there some kind of uniform agreement that can be made, or some kind of judgment that can be made based on those two? You're weighing, you're just weighing things the same way you would weigh anything else, and when it comes to a choice. And I want my choices to be as carefully measured and smart as possible. But the problem is, I'm not smart. I compare my knowledge and my experience and the things that I've done, and just I look on the past and I've got a lot of regrets for what I could have done differently. And I think if I'd had a better understanding of money and philosophy and politics, then I think I would look back on my past with fewer regrets and more pride. And I just want to get to a point where I've taken the best decisions that I can make and have fewer of these major paradigm shifts. I want to have some kind of overarching, mass applicable philosophy where I can go, maybe Genghis Khan's actions in terms of cruel, oppressive deeds and stuff. Like, I don't think I can justify that. War crimes. I don't think you can really justify certain war crimes. And what you do is you go, all right, are there any cultures that have a certain norm that is universally held. And, you know, I try to go to those universals and go, all right, is there some kind of foundational, zero level, deep seated deep seated truth, you know, behind it, some kind of thing that isn't going to vary, right? And then you can build stuff off of that. You can build all kinds of other philosophies out, you know, off of that. And I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if everything is just completely arbitrary. I don't think so. You know, that's a harder sell than arguing for one particular thing and having it be controversial. You know, misanthropy on its most extreme level, on its absolute worst case basis, generally disapproved. But there's some people who do think misanthropy is okay, and those people tend to be misanthropic, psychopathic, sociopathic, antisocial, you know, kind of despised figures. There's, you know, there's some people who admire that, but, you know, in general terms, it's hard to justify that, and it's a hard sell to say this is something that's okay, because you're going against some cultures. But other cultures, it's just like, okay, you're dealing with cratocracy, you know, the belief that might makes right. This is a long preamble to just going into stuff, but it's kind of me figuring out what it is that I want to study, while I've got spare brain space. I made a spreadsheet a long time ago, which was chronology of everything. I keep doing this thing where I want to do the most derived thing of something. You know, and philosophy and civilization and religion are all closely tied together, duh. You know, the problem is I keep doing this thing where the further back I go to try to find some kind of beginning to things, I keep going. Okay, here's the earliest date of language, like the earliest written language that we've got, and then it goes back to evolution of, you know, the larynx, you know, and early, like, anatomically modern humans. And then it goes back to the evolution of life, you know. First insect evolves wings. I really miss doing this kind of stuff. And then it goes back to, alright, what is the oldest galaxy? When did the Earth itself form? Were there any periods in between the start of the habitable epoch of the early universe and stuff before then. Um, and that's something that I want to read up on later, not now. There's like a brief window where it's possible that life could have formed but was then destroyed, which would be great for a science fiction novel. Because you're dealing with speculative stuff that's kind of semi-plausible. There's your ancient civilization that made the stargates and stuff. So I don't know where to start. I don't want to study religion. I just want to study philosophy. If I have to study religion in order to study philosophy, I will. Existential philosophy. What is this? I made a flowchart once and never got past that. It's just blank. Dependencies in philosophy, and it's blank. I made a spreadsheet about areas of importance, or areas of knowledge. It's interesting. So what I had done was I made a spreadsheet about a field of study. So let's say it's politics. Global importance assessment, whether it's of global importance. And compared to things like biology and medicine and natural history, politics really isn't that important. So I put, no, it's not globally important. Politics doesn't change anything beyond removing roadblocks put in place by inducing suffering and harm to the world and people. There's nothing good that can come from politics alone. So my view on that has changed a little bit. I still think it's like you're talking about removing anthropogenic roadblocks that have been put in place. But as we're seeing, politics can just decimate stuff like medicine and biology. So yeah, politics is very important, and that's kind of why I want to study philosophy some. Just do a Wikipedia crawl on some of it, or listen to more stuff about philosophy, so that people can't say, you're stupid, you don't know what you're talking about. Go read more books. I'm trying to. So I do have a curiosity and desire, which is the next column that I have. I don't want to go into politics. I just find certain issues to be urgent and important, and it's easy to have an opinion about stuff. I don't even have I had fields of study of history, fiction, math, geometry, philosophy, and abstract. Okay, so I did have one for philosophy in there. I don't know why I wrote this. I wish I could have elaborated more on it. So I'd lump those into the same thing. Math, geometry, philosophy, and abstract theory. All those are part of the same group. There's a lot of overlap in those. It's very low level stuff. It's groundwork for improving things, but it doesn't happen until hundreds of years down the road. I don't know what that means. I wish I had gone on about that some more. Um, I'm curious about it. I'm curious about math and abstract stuff, but my inability to comprehend it is a limiting factor. Possibility of acquiring skill in it. I'd be I'd be handicapped by my lack of intuitively grasping the concepts. It goes back to the thing of I'm not smart. I realize my own limitations, but that doesn't mean that I can't understand the earliest things. That's why I'm like, all right, look, I'm never going to be able to understand modern philosophy. The amount of time commitment I think is just not possible unless I go into that as a career. Uh, it's very easy to find stuff that isn't paywalled when it comes to philosophy because everybody's got their own stupid opinion about stuff. But when it comes to really complex philosophy, you have to go to a university library or you have to have a degree and stuff that enables you to have access to professional journals and stuff in order to be able to understand it. And then there's always the risk of you spend a week trying to read one paper and thoroughly understand it. I'm talking about white papers and journal articles, not magazine articles. We're talking about like ones that have like a gajillion citations at the end of them. I don't think I'm going to be able to get to that point. When it comes to old philosophy, I think I can at least understand that stuff. I don't have to have a comprehensive understanding of all philosophy that's ever been. But some philosophy is better than none, and I want to at least get to that point. I want to look up like what the elections are this year. Like when is our next election? That's for the general election from last year. Yeah. No, I don't think there's any elections this year. Mm, when is the next election in Kentucky? (2026). So the last deadline that we've got is Wednesday, November 5th. That's the earliest date for fixing the signatures on candidate filing forms for an office on the ballot in 2026. there's another calendar. Yeah, it's this. So 2025 is an absent year where there's nothing going on. I get emails all the time from Run for Something, and I'm just like, okay, I guess I'll run for something, maybe. So what could I run for? Could run for mayor. I'm not doing that. Be better than nothing, but that's kind of exposing me to a lot of attention, more attention than I'm comfortable with. City officers. No, county officers. What are county officers? Yeah, I don't want that. That's like very stuff that you have to have a legal experience in. District judges, justices of the Supreme Court, school board. Yeah, no, there's other people that are better suited to the school board. State house. Yeah, that just seems dangerous. I could see going for metro government, but the problem is just like you have to have some kind of legal experience to where you're not getting into trouble. You can't just be like, I want to make this legal or illegal and just like expect that you're not going to run into a lawsuit. It's like, all right, what are you going to do? Hire a lawyer? Get the lawyer to run for the office to begin with. So I'm just like, I don't want to run for something. I'd get into trouble. Maybe. I've got until the end of the year to file for something. Although I think metro government seats, those are nonpartisan now. It's pretty obvious like who's partisan about stuff. Like people could say, I'm a this party or that party, but they're not. When they show up on the ballot, at least they're not. They're not going to be assigned a letter next to their name. How old is this spreadsheet? Last time I edited it was in June of 2023, so it was 2 years ago. I think I had made this originally even before then. See version history. How old actually is this? It goes back to August of 2015. And I think what kind of got me curious about putting this all together was because I was moving from super hardcore, very conservative Christianity into just atheism. also I think I had like stuff in here about about like what the traditionally assigned date of birth of Christ would be, because that's where BCE and the Common Era is based around. So that's why it was just like, all right, can we come to some kind of agreement on what this is, so that we can base our chronology around that. Why do I have this based on that though? It really ought to be more based on like before present, and actually I do have it. I've got two different columns. I've got one that's for the BCE and one for like after the Big Bang. Like that's the column that I'd really rather go to. Why do I have that there? Interesting. Yeah, I'd have to dig more into that to kind of understand it. So what do I want to look up on Wikipedia when it comes to philosophy? Because I've been dancing around it, like, and not even going on to Wikipedia and doing stuff. But I think it's important to have some kind of introduction. Um, Ow! I keep doing that. I need to go to bed and get up at around, I guess, 6 or 7, to where it's still cool outside, and start doing car-related stuff. Jack the car up, take a look underneath it, and see what needs to be replaced. Start doing that. I really don't want to, but I kind of need to. Start testing stuff out. Like, start documenting what needs to be fixed by getting pictures of it. Hmm. Alright, so maybe I need to create a separate spreadsheet just for philosophy, or not. I kind of don't want to wreck this spreadsheet, but maybe it just needs to happen. what is it that I want to do? I wanted to learn more about more about. I mean, the latest thing that I've been curious about is like Marxist and Engels-ish kind of philosophy. It's hard to get a hold of. It's just beyond my kin, beyond my understanding to kind of know what in the world they're trying to say. So I was looking up, like prehistoric communism, what what the earliest communism is, and it kind of goes back to stuff that's theoretical. Like going like, maybe this peoples were like this, and it's kind of just guessing. So let's just go to Wikipedia. We're gonna go to Wikipedia. I'm gonna upload this to YouTube. Actually, if you're watching this, it's probably going to be you're listening to it on YouTube. Do I have low wiki on here? Lomekwi. Yeah. So, Lomekwi is an archaeological site located on the west bank of Turkana Lake in Kenya. It is an important milestone in the history of human archaeology. An archaeological team from Stony Brook University in the United States discovered traces of Lomekwi by chance in July 2011 and made substantial progress 4 years after in in-depth excavations. Stony Brook University is based in New York. There is a neighborhood called Stony Brook in Louisville, so maybe it's taken after that. Do I have Lomekwi on here? No, I don't. Maybe that ought to go in there. So one of the things that I was curious about was pre-Stone Age stuff. It's been speculated, and emphasis on the speculated part, that there was a plant age. And the problem is, we don't have our artifacts for the plant age, just because it's like, the stuff that we have that's been preserved is stone tools, because it's stone, guys. Like, if you make a wood axe, it's not going to be preserved anywhere near like what something stone would be. I don't know if it's even possible to have something that far back preserved at all. Let's look that up. No, not the Plantagenets. The Wood Age. So we want to know what was before the Wood Age, or before the Stone Age. We want the Wood Age. earliest stone tools post-date the earliest rock art and the earliest clothes. It's interesting. Estimates of when humans began wearing clothes vary from 40,000 years to as many as 3 million years ago. A study in 2003 suggested humans were wearing clothing at least 100,000 years ago from evidence about lice. Interesting. Human body louse cannot live outside of clothing, dying after only a few hours without shelter. This strongly implies that the date of the body louse's speciation from its parent, Pediculus humanus, can have taken place no earlier than the earliest human adoption of clothing. This date, at which the body louse, Humanus corporeus, diverged both from its parent species and its sibling species, the head louse, Pediculus humanus capitis, has been estimated to between 40,000 to 170,000 years before present. However, recent transcriptome analyses cast doubt on whether lice provide a means to date the origin of clothing, since it is found that body and head lice were almost genetically identical. Indeed, the phenotypic flexibility associated with the emergence of body lice is probably a result of regulatory changes, perhaps epigenetic in origin, triggered by environmental signals. Dating with direct archaeological evidence produces dates consistent with those of lice. In September 2021, scientists reported evidence of clothes made 120,000 years ago based on findings in deposits in Morocco. So I would rather go with the 120,000 years figure rather than the lice thing, because they're saying lice, there's kind of a big crossover. The development of clothing is okay, I don't care about that. So let's just go with 120,000 years ago. That's when clothing was made. But we want to know what happened prior to the Stone Age. The early Stone Age, and then there's the lower Paleolithic. That's where we get into Lamechwi. We want to know what was before then. Because it's like, alright, look, if there was something prior to that stage, Pliocene epoch, yeah, we don't really care so much about. Okay, there's also a crossover between technological development and philosophy, scientific stuff. You get applied science and you get scientific theory, and you go from scientific theory and applied science to stuff like stone tools. There's some kind of theory that drives that idea of, hey, what if I take this stone tool and, do something with it? So there's philosophy behind that. So I guess you could say that's the earliest philosophy, is observational cause and effect stuff. But then that goes to like animals. Can you say that they have some kind of pseudo cause and effect understanding? I mean, dogs definitely do. Like all kinds of animals do, but what's the difference between that and regular philosophy? You know, what's the difference between environmental stimulus and plant age preceding I want to know this based on Wikipedia, not based on that stuff. Botanical, the botanical age. I've never heard of anything called the botanical age. When I looked it up, closest thing I found was a time of great adventure and discovery couched in the age of reason. No, that's not it. We're not talking about. I just want to know. Did people have tools made of plants before they had tools made of stone? It's like, all right, tell me about the history of sticks. So there's agriculture. Interesting. Okay, we're gonna drop that then. Oops. Alright, let's go back to the history. Let's go to that. History of communism. Pre-Marxist communism. Defined communism as a political movement in 1848, there were many similar ideas in the past which could be called communist experiments. Marx himself saw the original hunter-gatherer state of humankind as primitive communism. Marx theorized that only after humanity was capable of producing surplus did private property develop. Chiefs of the Six Nations of the Haudenosaunee. Really? Interesting. The Iroquois? What is an endonym? It's actually Haudenosaunee. Interesting. People who are building a log house. So where does Iroquois come from then? Their country has been called Iroquois, and Haudenosaunee, Haudenosaunee in English, and Iroquois in French. The people of the Iroquois included the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca. Not to be confused with the Greek philosopher Seneca. After 1722, the Iroquois speaking Tuscarora people from the southeast were accepted into the Confederacy, from which point it was known as the Six Nations. So how long did it last? Is it still going on? In the 2020 U.S. Census, in total, 113,814 people identified as Iroquois. Several communities to this day descended from the tribes of the Iroquois Confederacy. And there's recognized lands in Toronto and Ottawa. Main article, Primitive Communism. Primitive communism is a way of describing gift economies. What is a gift economy? A gift economy or gift culture is a system of exchange where valuables are not sold but rather given without an explicit agreement for immediate or future rewards. Social norms and customs govern giving a gift in gift culture. Although there is some expectation of reciprocity, gifts are not given in an explicit exchange of goods or services for money or some other good or service. This contrasts with a market economy or bartering, where goods and services are primarily explicitly exchanged for value received. The nature of gift economies is subject to the foundational debate in anthropology. Anthropological research into gift economies began with, and I don't know what that strike through an L means. Yeah, I can't read IPA English, or IPA Polish for that matter. Backwards C. Okay, let's look up backwards C. Off. little squiggly thing on the bottom left leg. Canyon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So Branya Swa Branya Swaf Branya Swaf? Really? Is that
Ładny.
Ładny? Broniesław Malinowski. Alright, Broniesław Malinowski. He was an anthropologist and ethnologist whose writings on ethnology. Need to slow down my rate of reading. Whose writings on ethnography, social theory, and field research have exerted a lasting influence on the discipline of anthropology. Malinowski was born and raised in what was part of the Austrian partition of Poland, Krakow. He graduated from King John III Sobieski Second High School. In the years 1902 to 1906, he studied at the philosophy department of the Jagiellonian University and receives his doctorate there in 1908. In 1910, at the London School of Economics, LSE, he worked on exchange in economics, analyzing Aboriginal Australia through ethnographic documents. In 1914, he traveled to Australia. He conducted research in the Trobriand Islands and other regions in New Guinea and Melanesia, where he stayed there for several years, studying the indigenous cultures. Returning to England after World War I, he published his principal work, Argonauts of the Western Pacific, 1922, which established him as one of Europe's most important anthropologists. He took posts as a lecturer and later as a chair in anthropology at the LSE, attracting large numbers of students and exerting great influence on the development of social anthropology. Over the years, he guest lectured at several American universities. When World War II broke out, he remained in the United States, taking an appointment at Yale University. He died in 1942 while at Yale and was interred in a grave at New Haven, Connecticut. In 1967, his widow, Valletta Swan, published his personal diary kept during his field work in Melanesia and New Guinea. It has since been a source of controversy because of its ethnocentric and egocentric nature. So how old was he when he died? 58, so he died pretty young. Malinowski's ethnography of the Trobriand Islands described the complex institution of the Kula ring and became foundational for subsequent theories of reciprocity and exchange. He is widely regarded as an eminent field worker, and his texts regarding anthropological field methods were foundational to early anthropology, popularizing the concept of participatory observation. His approach to social theory was a form of psychological functionalism that emphasized how social and cultural institutions serve basic human needs, a perspective opposed by A.R. Radcliffe Brown's structural functionalism, which emphasized ways in which social institutions function in relation to society as a whole. I don't understand that. Okay, so let's break that down a little bit. So he was saying that social and cultural institutions serve basic human needs. And the other guy's thing was social social institutions as they relate to society as a whole. So I guess, I don't know, religion as a social institution versus society as a whole, which just all of human, you know, institutions. No, specific social institutions versus all of society. I've been doing this for an hour and have barely gotten started. Alright, let's skip to the controversy. Interesting. I'm just reading this article on the Kula ring. It's a system of exchange for purposes of enhancing one's social status and prestige. So it's just kind of a system of tracking tracking political favors. So it's different than commodity exchange. Because there's reciprocity involved. Prestation. Alright, so skip to controversy. Give me the controversy. Give me the give me why people oppose it. so that's just talking about where the research began rather than where it actually is. The Kula trade appeared to be gift-like since Trogrianders would travel over great distances over dangerous seas to give what were considered valuable objects without any guarantee of a return. Malinowski's debate with the French anthropologist Marcel Mauss quickly established the complexity of gift exchange and introduced a series of technical terms such as reciprocity, inalienable possessions, and presentation. Presentation to distinguish between different forms of exchange. In cultural anthropology, reciprocity refers to the non-market exchange of goods or labor, ranging from direct barter, immediate exchange, to forms of gift exchange where a return is eventually expected, delayed exchange, as in the exchange of birthday gifts. It is thus distinct from the true gift, where no return is expected. When the exchange is immediate, as in barter, it does not create a social relationship. When exchange is delayed, it creates both a relationship as well as obligation for a return. In other words, debt. Hence, some forms of reciprocity can establish an hierarchy if the debt is not repaid. The failure to make a return may end a relationship between equals. Reciprocal exchanges can also have a political effect through the creation of multiple obligations and the establishment of leadership, as in the gift exchange, mocha, between big men in Melanesia. That sounds complicated. Some forms of reciprocity are thus closely related to redistribution, where goods and services are collected by a central figure for eventual distribution to followers. Marshall Sahlins, an American cultural anthropologist, identified three main types of reciprocity: generalized, balanced, and negative, in the book Stone Age Economics. Reciprocity was also the general principle used by Claude Levi-Strauss. Levi-Strauss? Apparently, people that made pants were also anthropologists and ethnologists. So he was born to French Jewish and then turned agnostic parents who were living in Brussels, where his father was working as a portrait painter at the time. He grew up in Paris, living on the upscale 16th arrondissement, named after the artist Claude Lorraine, whose work he admired and wrote about. Claude Lorraine was a painter. So his maternal grandfather was the Rabbi of Versailles, so that could explain why he was living in an upscale arrondissement. He lived to be 100. Claude Levi-Strauss. Reciprocity was also the general principle used by Claude Levi-Strauss to explain the elementary structures of kinship, one of the most influential works on kinship theory in the post-war period. The history of the norm of reciprocity in European economic thought. Do I want to go into this? I mean, it kind of has to do with philosophy, but it's not really giving me any book recommendations. Because I doubt that any of this stuff is going to be on Libby. How do I just log in? Okay, I'm gonna have to do that later. Okay. I can use my library card to sign in. That's where I've been getting a lot of my books from. Listening to a lot of the books anyway. Nope, 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 nope. There we go. Invalid. Go to my passwords, look up my passwords. I wonder if you could go by the reflection of my glasses and look at my passwords that way. You would have to have a really good resolution on my camera. There we go. Can we not? Stop. That is my thing. I don't know. I've got it written down here. I just want to search. Here, what if we go to Ellen Peel's website? Go to my account, go to manage passwords. That should have been it. Alright, we are looking up how do we just search? There we go. It's at the bottom of the page. Alright, we are looking up, all of this was just to look up if Stone Age economics is available. No, it's not. Well, fine, just notify me. I keep running into that kind of situation. Search catalog. What's it called? Stone Age economics. Interlibrary loan. How do I do interlibrary loan? I have dreams sometimes where it's just like, do you ever have that dream where it's like you have a library book that you haven't returned and now your late fees are like extreme? Like, I'm looking at my library thing and I can see that I'm caught up. Like, I don't have anything due, nothing checked out. There's the U of L Law Library. Aha. I don't know if I still have access to the University of Louisville library. Don't know how I go about doing this. It's just an article? I wonder if I could bribe someone into letting me have access to their U of L account so I can check out library stuff. Give me an in to the knowledge base. Just cheat so I can access the secrets of the universe. I could just get this book on Amazon. Probably. $18. Yeah, no, it's not happening. How long is this book? See, the problem is, I could check this book out and get it, and then realize I have no idea what you're talking about. Okay, it's 346 pages long. I could just do an interlibrary loan from U of L to LFPL, maybe. Pay them $1. Let me get access to it. Do I really need this? I mean, yeah, it kind of okay, fine. How about just the paywall. It's difficult. Maybe I need to, like, I don't think this is the kind of book that I would be able to find on pirate websites, you know? Pirate Bay. Pirate Bay. Nope. Yeah, that's not the kind of book that you'd find on the Pirate Bay. Alright, I've been doing this for an hour and a half. I'm kind of starting to lose attention and motivation. Annette Weiner, is that Weiner or Weiner? Annette Weiner argued that the norm of reciprocity is deeply implicated in the development of Western economic theory. Both John Locke and Adam Smith used the idea of reciprocity to justify a free market without state intervention. Reciprocity was used, on the one hand, to legitimize the idea of self-regulating market, and to argue how individual vice was transformed into social good on the other. Yeah, I kind of get what they're talking about. Western economic theorists, starting with the 18th century Scots economists, Sir James Stewart and Smith, differentiated James Stewart and James Smith? Or are you talking about Adam Smith? Differentiated pre-modern natural or self-subsistent economies from civilized economies marked by division of labor that necessitated exchange. Like early sociologist Emile Durkheim, they viewed natural economies as characterized by mechanical solidarity, like so many peas in a pod, whereas the civilized division of labor made producers mutually dependent on one another, resulting in organic solidarity. So I guess mechanical is in physical proximity and stuff, like forced groups, you know, you're kind of just by necessity grouped together, like you're individuals in a group versus people that are dependent on each other. It's like you're separate but a part of something versus organic solidarity where you have dynamics of dependency. These oppositions solidified by the late 19th century in the evolutionary idea of primitive communism, marked by mechanical solidarity as the antithesis and alter ego of Western Homo economicus. It is this armchair anthropology opposition that originally informed modern anthropological debate when Malinowski sought to overturn the opposition and argue that archaic societies are equally regulated by the norm of reciprocity and maximizing behavior. So he's saying that humanity is, at least archaic societies were capitalistic, I guess, expected something in return. This concept was key to the debate between early anthropologist Branislaw Malinowski and Marcel Mauss on the meaning of Kula exchange in the Trobriand Islands off Papua New Guinea during the First World War. Malinowski used Kula exchange to demonstrate that apparently random gift-giving was in fact a key political process by which non-state political leadership spanning a vast archipelago was established. Gift-giving, he argued, was not altruistic, as it supposedly is in our society, but politically motivated for individual gain. Marcel Mauss theorized the impetus for a return as the spirit of the gift, an idea that has long provoked that an idea that has provoked a long debate in I'm going to get it. This is my practice. I've got one viewer. I should practice while I have one viewer versus when I've got 100. I don't want 100 viewers actually. This is me thinking out loud. This is me body doubling. I realize that this is probably a bot that is watching. Actually, it might just be me counting as the one viewer. Marcel Mauss theorized the impetus for return as the spirit of the gift, an idea that has provoked a long debate in economic anthropology on what motivated the reciprocal exchange. Claude Levi-Strauss, drawing on Mauss, argued there were three spheres of exchange covered by reciprocity: language, exchange of words; kinship, exchange of women; and economics, exchange of things. He thus claimed all human relationships are based on the norm of reciprocity. This claim has been disputed by anthropologists Jonathan Perry, Annette Weiner, and David Graeber, amongst others. None of this is giving me book recommendations. Marshall Solins has emphasized that non-market exchange is constrained by societal relationships. That is, exchange in non-market societies is less about acquiring the means of production, whether land or tools, and more about the redistribution of finished goods throughout a community. These social relationships are largely kinship-based. So, who's the one that was Marshall Solins? He's kind of outside that big sphere of Weiner, Graeber, Perry, Malinowski, and Mauss. So the point is distribution of finished goods versus acquiring the means of production. So he's more about the things that have been produced rather than the like the means of production. These social relationships are largely kinship based. His discussion of types of reciprocity is located within what he calls domestic mode of production. His typology of reciprocity thus refers to cultures lacking a political state, and it applies only insofar as the economy and social relationships have not been modified by the historical penetration of states. So basically saying the only time that capitalism exists is when in a reciprocal form is when you've got a state. So if you don't have the regulatory body, capitalism goes out the window. Which is kind of why, it's that's an anarcho-communistic strain of thought, I think. Paul Silito has extended the analysis of reciprocity in these conditions, arguing that the type of reciprocity found will depend on which sphere of production is being examined. The production of subsistence goods is under the control of domestic units and hence is marked by generalized reciprocity or generalized exchange. Wealth objects, by their nature from outside, are competitively exchanged to acquire status, but no one is able to control their production and hence centralize power. I don't know what that means. Okay, so he's talking about if there's reciprocity, like the type of reciprocity depends on which sphere of production is being examined. So, production of goods is what determines the reciprocity. Kind of like, say it's like they said, the exchange of women. Do they mean like the exchange of like between women of things? Like baby clothes? Are you talking about baby clothes? That kind of thing is what determines the reciprocity. Like yard sales. Okay, that's getting off into a different thing. Generalized exchange is a type of social exchange in which a desired outcome that is sought by the individual is not dependent on resources provided by that individual. It is assumed to be a fundamental social mechanism that stabilizes relations in society by unilateral resource giving, in which one's giving is not necessarily reciprocated by the recipient, but by a third party. Huh? Who's the third party? Thus, in contrast to direct or restricted exchange or reciprocity, in which parties exchange resources with each other, generalized exchange generally involves, or naturally involves, more than two parties. Examples of exchange include matrilineal, cross-cousin marriage, and helping a stranded driver on a desolate road. What? Cross-cousin marriage? Is that a good idea, or is that going to lead to inbreeding? This is what Wikipedia crawls are. Wealth objects, by their nature or from outside, are competitively exchanged to acquire status, but no one is able to control their production and hence centralize power. So I guess you're talking about the cooler rings? Oh, so you're talking about stuff that's symbolic rather than something that actually has inherent value. So they're saying that you can let people into that exchange, like based on if you produce some kind of gift. Solon's typology. In these circumstances, just give me books to read. I wanted to do like Greek authors and stuff. I'm gonna jump off of this line of thought. Okay, how about I look up this? 4 weeks wait. Yep, I'll wait. I'm gonna save this to my maybe read thing. I don't know why it's not showing that. That's good to know. At least there's one book I can listen to in 4 weeks. Some of this stuff I can get from LibriVox, like if it's really old, because frickin' Libby tends to be very capitalistic. So let's look this up on LibriVox. Nope. Nope. Nobody's read it. Wait. This is a book on communism written by Engels. Why am I having to not have access to it? Is it on archive.org? I'm looking for just a copy of the book on archive.org. 79 results. Look, I need you to just show the stuff by angles, okay? Wait, what about on YouTube? Maybe somebody's made a reading of it. Aha! Please tell me this isn't like...
The Origin of the Family, Private Property and the State by Friedrich Engels. Written March to May 1884. First published October 1884.
Finally get friggin' something to listen to.
Introduction.
Alright, if we're gonna do this, here. We're gonna have to go from start to, I don't know why I didn't do that sooner. Okay, so the reason why I didn't do friggin' Marx's stuff first is because he's got a lot of poetry written to his girlfriend. Or his mistress, I guess. No, it was his girlfriend. If I were to read his stuff chronologically, that's what I'd find out. And the problem too is like when he starts writing, it's not like he's like, here's the basic stuff. He just jumps right in. Like, he's just like going from 0 to 60 and like nothing flat. Alright, let's... Who started writing first? Why don't I just read stuff, from start to finish, based on this website, the marxists.architectures.net. Nature herself. That's a good start. Nature herself has determined the sphere of activity in which the animal should move, and it peacefully moves within that sphere, without attempting to go beyond it, without even an inkling of any other. To man, too, the deity gave a general aim. The deity. Is he just saying religion? To man, too, religion gave... Okay, so I'm just replacing that word with religion. To man, too, the deity gave a general aim that of... Or I guess he's saying, like, okay, in terms of expression of religion, like, this is what afforded people their thingy. To man too, the deity gave a general aim, that of ennobling mankind and himself, but he left it to man to seek the means by which this aim can be achieved. He left it to him to choose the position in society most suited to him, from which he can best uplift himself in society. What? Okay, so I guess he's basically saying an animal kind of just does animal-y stuff without really even thinking about it, and only understands like its own thing. To man too, the deity gave a general aim, ennobling mankind and himself. So he's basically saying, you can elevate humanity and yourself to another level by your actions. So it's basically, you got individualism, self-promotion, opportunism, that kind of stuff. And, you've got society, which is like, alright, do you want to elevate society too? And it's kind of up to you to decide that. This choice is a great privilege of man over the rest of creation, but at the same time it is an act which can destroy his whole life, frustrate all his plans, and make him unhappy. Serious consideration of this choice, therefore, is certainly the first duty of a young man who is beginning his career and does not want to leave his most important affairs to chance. That makes sense. No comments. Maybe I ought to be writing this down. Animals do their thing and aren't aware of anything other than I can't even read my own stuff. I need to go to bed soon. Animals do their thing and aren't aware of anything that's why. It's because I wrote it weird. Animals do their thing and aren't aware of any other mode of doing their thing. Humans have a general idea of themselves and society, but the choice of how to accomplish whatever aims they choose, whatever aims and priorities they choose. Humans have a general idea of themselves and society, but the choice of how to accomplish whatever aims and priorities they choose are up to him. This choice is a great privilege to a man over the rest of creation, but at the same time an act which can destroy his whole life, frustrate his plans, and make him unhappy. Serious consideration of this choice, therefore, is certainly the first duty of a young man who's beginning his career and does not want to leave his most important affairs to chance. That's a good way of putting that. Careers are Sir's business. Careers are Sir's business, then you can screw yourself over. If you choose the wrong one. You owe it to yourself to take it seriously. You owe it to yourself to not let yourself be guided by my roommate didn't wash his hands. To not let yourself be guided by your environment, by your environment alone. Everyone has an aim in view which to him at least seems great and actually is so if the deepest conviction, the most innermost voice of the heart declares it so. For the deity never leaves mortal man without for the deity never leaves mortal man wholly without a guide. He speaks softly but with certainty. Was he like a deist? Like, did he start out as a deist? Because it sounds like he's a deist. I mean, he's mentioning the deity. Everyone has an aim in view which to him at least seems great, but so you have some kind of inkling. Everyone has even the smallest inkling about what their deepest convictions are and use those as a solid guide to act on. But this voice can easily be drowned, and what we took for inspiration can be the product of the moment, which another moment can perhaps also destroy. Our imagination, perhaps, is set on fire, our emotions excited. Phantoms flit before our eyes, and we plunge headlong into what impetuous instinct suggests, which we imagine the deity himself has pointed out to us. But what we ardently embrace place soon repels us, and we see our whole existence in ruins. This isn't instinct or whim. This isn't instinct, excitement, or impulsiveness. You need to listen very quietly. This isn't instinct, excitement, or impulsiveness. You need to listen carefully. Is it carefully listen or listen carefully? You need to listen carefully to your innermost motivation. Alright, bored. Done. Just closing out of everything. I give up. I have one thing to listen to. I'll try to listen to it and see what happens. Doom. Podcast is over. I'm gonna post this on YouTube soon.